just to linger a little bit longer, we started this part of the conversation talking about, did humans evolve to think? Did the human brain evolve to think? Implying, is there like a progress to the thing that's always improving?
That's right. We never, yeah. And so the answer is no.
But let me sort of push back. But so your intuition is very strong here, not your intuition, the way you describe this. But is it possible there's a direction to this evolution? Like, do you think of this evolution as having a direction? Like it's like walking along a certain path towards something? Is it, what is it? uh, is it Elon Musk said like the Earth got bombarded with photons, and then all of a sudden, like a Tesla was launched into space or whatever, a rocket started coming. Like, is there a sense in which, even though in the like within the system, the evolution seems to be this massive variation, we're kind of trying to find our niches and so on. But do you think there ultimately, when you zoom out, there is a direction that's strong that does tend towards greater complexity and intelligence?
No. So, I mean, and again,
Yeah.
what I would say is I'm really just echoing people who are much smarter than I am about this.
But see, you're saying smarter. I thought I thought there's no smarter.
No, I didn't say there's no smarter. I said there's no direction.
Okay.
So I think the thing to say, or what I understand to be the case, is that there's variation. It's not unbounded variation, and there are selectors. There are pressures that will select, and so not anything is possible because we live on a planet that has certain physical realities to it, right? But those physical realities are what constrain the possibilities. The physical realities of our genes and the physical realities of our corporeal bodies and the physical realities of of life on this planet. So what I would say is that there's no direction, but there is it's not infinite possibility, because we live on a particular planet that has particular statistical regularities in it, and some things will never happen. And so all of those things are interacting with our genes and so on, and our, the physical nature of our bodies, to make some things more possible and some things less possible. Look, I mean, humans have very complex brains, but birds have complex brains, and so do octopuses have very complex brains, and all three of those brains are somewhat different from one another. Some birds have very complex brains. Some even have rudimentary language. They have no cerebral cortex. I mean, they have. This is now lesson 2, right? They have. Is it lesson 2 or lesson 1? Let me think. No, this is lesson 1. They have the same neurons that in a human become the cerebral cortex. Birds have those neurons. They just don't form themselves into a cerebral cortex. But I mean, crows, for example, are very sophisticated animals. They can do a lot of the things that humans can do. In fact, all of the things that humans do that are very special, that seem very special, there's at least one other animal on the planet that can do those things too. What's special about the human brain is that we put them all together. So we learn from one another. We don't have to experience everything ourselves. We can watch another animal or another human experience something, and we can learn from that. Well, there are many other animals who can learn by copying.
Yeah.
That we communicate with each other very, very efficiently. We have language, but we're not the only animals who are efficient communicators. There are lots of other animals who can efficiently communicate, like bees, for example. We cooperate really well with one another to do grand things, but there are other animals that cooperate too. And so every innovation that we have, other animals have too. What we have is we have all of those together, interwoven in this very complex dance, in a brain that is not unique exactly, but that is it does have some features that make it particularly useful for us to do all of these things, to have all of these things intertwined. So, our brains are actually, the last time we talked, I made a mistake because I said, in my enthusiasm, I said, our brains are not larger, or relative to our bodies, our brains are not larger than other primates, and that's actually not true. Actually, our brains relative to our body size is somewhat larger. So,
Yeah.
an ape who's not a human, that's not a human, their brains are larger than their body sizes than, say, relative to like a smaller monkey. And a human's brain is larger relative to its body size than a
So
gorilla.
that's a good
or
approximation of your of whatever of the bunch of stuff that you can shove in there. Your
But what I was
capabilities.
going to say is, but our cerebral cortex is not larger than what you would expect for a brain of its size. So relative to, say, an ape, like a gorilla or a chimp, or even a mammal like a dolphin or an elephant, our brains, our cerebral cortex is as large as you would expect it to be for a brain of our size.
Hmm.
So there's nothing special about our cerebral cortex. And this is something I explain in the book, where I say, okay, like by analogy, if you walk into somebody's house and you see that they have a huge kitchen, you might think, well, maybe this is a place I really definitely want to eat dinner at because, these people must be gourmet cooks. But you don't know anything about what the size of their kitchen means unless you consider it in relation to the size of the rest of the house. If it's a big kitchen in a really big house,
Yeah.
it's not telling you anything special, right? If it's a big kitchen in a small house, then that might be a place that you want to stay for dinner, because it's more likely that kitchen is large for a special reason. And so the cerebral cortex of a human brain isn't in and of itself special because of its size. However, there are some genetic changes that have happened in the human brain as it's grown to whatever size is, typical for the whole brain size, right? There are some changes that do give the human brain slightly more of some capacities. They're not special, but we can do some things much better than other animals. And, correspondingly, other animals can do some things much better than we can. We can't grow back limbs. We can't lift 50 times our own body weight. Well, I mean, maybe you can, but I can't lift 50 times my own body weight.
Ants with that regard are very impressive. And then you're saying with the frontal cortex, like the size is not always the right measure of capability, I guess. So size isn't everything.
Size isn't everything.
That's a quotable. People like it when I disagree, so let me disagree with you on something, or just like play devil's advocate a little bit. So you've painted a really nice picture that evolution doesn't have a direction. But is it possible, if we just ran Earth over and over again, like this video game, that the final result will be the same? So in the sense that eventually there'll be an AGI type HAL 9000 type system that just like flies and colonizes nearby Earth-like planets, and it's always will be the same. And the different organisms and the different evolution of the brain, like it doesn't feel like it has a direction, but given the constraints of Earth and whatever this imperative, whatever the hell is running this universe, like it seems like it's running towards something. Is it possible that it will always be the same? Thereby, it will be a direction.
Yeah, I think, as you know better than anyone else, that answer to that question is, of course, there's some probability that could happen, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a yes or no answer. It's what's the probability that would happen. And there's a whole distribution of possibilities. So maybe what's the probability we end up with exactly the same complement of creatures including us? What's the likelihood that we end up with, creatures that are similar to humans but similar in certain ways, let's say, but not exactly humans, or, all the way to a completely different distribution of creatures.
What's your intuition? Like if you were to bet money, what does that distribution look like if we ran Earth over and over and over
So
again?
I would say, given the you're now asking me questions that
this is not science.
This is not science. So, but I would say, okay, well, what's the probability that it's going to be a carbon life form? Probably high.
Yeah.
But that's because I don't know anything about really
alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really well versed in that. What's the probability that, so what's the probability that the animals will begin in the ocean and crawl out onto land
versus the other way?
I would say probably high. I don't know, but but do I think, what's the likelihood that we would end up with exactly the same or very similar? I think it's low, actually. I wouldn't say it's low, but I would say it's not 100%, and I'm not even sure it's 50%. I would say I don't think that we're here by accident, because I think, like I said, there are constraints. Like there are some physical constraints about Earth. Now, of course, if you were a cosmologist, you could say, well, the fact that the Earth is, if you were to do the Big Bang over again and keep doing it over and over and over again, would you still get the same solar systems? Would you still get the same planets? Would you still get the same galaxies, the same solar systems, the same planets? I don't know, but my guess is probably not, because there are random things that happen that can, again, send things in one direction, make one set of trajectories possible and another set impossible. So, but I guess my if I were going to bet something, money or something valuable, I would probably say it's not 0 and it's not 100%, and it's probably not even 50%. So there's some probability, but
it will be similar.
That would be similar, but I just think there are too many degrees of freedom. Yeah. There are too many degrees of freedom. I mean, one of the real tensions in writing this book is to, on the one hand, there's some truth in saying that humans are not special. We are just, we're not special in the animal kingdom. All animals are well adapted. If they're survived, they're well adapted to their niche. It does happen to be the case that our niche is large. For any individual human, your niche is whatever it is. But for the species, right, we live almost everywhere, not everywhere, but almost everywhere on the planet, but not in the ocean. And actually other animals like bacteria, for example, have us beat miles, hands down, right? So we're, by any definition, we're not special. We're just, adapted to our environment.
But bacteria don't have a podcast.
Exactly. And
they're not able
that's
to
the other. So that's the tension, right? So on the one hand, we're not special animals. We're just, particularly well adapted to our niche. On the other hand, our niche is huge, and we don't just adapt to our environment. We add to our environment. We make stuff up, give it a name, and then it becomes real. And so no other animal can do that. And so I think the way to think about it from my perspective, or the way I made sense of it, is to say, you can look at any individual single characteristic that a human has that seems remarkable, and you can find that in some other animal. Mm-hmm. What you can't find in any other animal is all of those characteristics together in a brain that is souped up in particular ways, like ours is. And if you combine these things, multiple interacting causes, right? Not one essence, like your cortex, your big neocortex, but which isn't really that big. I mean, it's just big for your big brain, for the size of your big brain. It's the size it should be. If you add all those things together and they interact with each other, that produces some pretty remarkable results. Mm-hmm. And if you're aware of that, then you can start asking different kinds of questions about what it means to be human, and what kind of a human you want to be, and what kind of a world do you want to curate for the next generation of humans. So I think that's the goal anyways, right? It's just to have a glimpse of, instead of thinking about things in a simple linear way, just to have a glimpse of some of the things that matter, that evidence suggests matters, to the kind of brain in the kind of bodies that we have. Once you know that, you can work with it a little bit.